Great. So everyone hear me?
Sounds good, Kevin.
Great.
Over to you.
Great. I'm assuming, let me know if you're not seeing my screen correctly or hear my voice correctly. But all right, so here we go. So thanks so much, Steve, for that introduction. And as Steve just mentioned, I'm here for the people on the call that I do know. You most likely know me more as a professor at McGill University in the Department of Geography in the School of Environment. I've had the pleasure of being part of MJ's from the beginning. I was a small part in the theme two, the theme led by Megan Winters, as well as the pilot project. So I've been part of the research for a long time, but I'm here today to talk about what Steve and the MJ team asked my company CurbCut to visualize this really rich set of data that he's just been explaining. So this huge survey of 27,000 people, and to find a way to get it out to the public in a way that's easy to use, it's intuitive, it's helpful to get it out to practitioners, to researchers, and to the general public. So that's what I'm really excited here to talk about today, is this project we've been working on for a while, to make that happen. And so, just quickly, what I'll do in the next half hour or so is introduce what we've done on this interactive dashboard with the National Survey on Transport Poverty. Talk a little bit about the background and the tech stack that we use to accomplish that, and then I'll walk you through a live demo. So, this will be available to the public, and so I'll sort of basically teach you how to use this thing to make the kind of figures and graphs and data sets and things that you can use to really dig into this data, and to get as much of that out of it as you can. And then hopefully at the end we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A. So that's what we're going to do. And before I go forward, I want to make sure, as Steve already mentioned, the actual collection of the data, the design of the survey was with Catherine Morancy and Hawaida Hassan, who kind of took the lead in all the piloting of the questions. And as was mentioned, I think took years of work to kind of to make that all happen. And the whole team over on MJ's, of course, Steve and Ignacio Snado Hegton, Amir Foha, and Jasmine Moazab, who were really, we met with them, Curb Cut met with them, and got lots of feedback, and we tried our best. I think it was a great sort of collaboration to take what the MJ team wanted, and to implement that into a product that we're really really happy to show. And also, I should mention that on the Curbs Cut side, Maxime Béranger de Bois was the main, sort of tech lead and all this stuff, in our team, Dominique Boulet and Sam Cohen as well. So to sort of dig in, so what we were mandated to do, what our goal here, was to basically create an intuitive, fast, and that it allows people to visualize and understand the survey at a variety of spatial scales, and across different population groups, across different kind of questions that we're interested in looking at. And also to allow users to export, basically custom graphs, tables, charts, different visualizations, as well as whatever kind of data that they want. And I'll give some demonstrations of this in a couple minutes here. And also, this was very important from the MJ's side and from us as well, is to be transparent, where there are data limitations and suppression rules. So again, I'll give some examples of that, where we're not giving percentages if we're having very small sample sizes, for example. Once we start slicing and dicing different population groups and whatnot. And to give sort of quick answers, and insights into this very rich data set that's been collected. So as you'll see in a few minutes, you're able to get a quick visualization, a graph, a figure, or even your own sort of data set, that can answer a bunch of different research questions. And so what we're kind of trying to solve here is one great thing about MJ, and in particular the survey, is that it is they have made the data available, and there's certain rules in terms of who has access to what, and the micro data, and the data that has geographic indicators and everything, but that's not necessarily of use to people who are non-technical or the general public, and there's certain, for good reason, there's different sort of privacy and rules by who can access what. And so we wanted a way to, the team wanted a way to be able to show this in a way that's available to the general public and is usually and is very useful. And this is new. There's nothing like this. As Steve mentioned, we do live in a very data-rich country, and there's lots of surveys, lots of ways to visualize data and geospatial stuff. But this is the first time to really look at these specific questions, across the country, in a way that's super useful. And also, in terms of having, this access to these very specific, different socioeconomic groups and things that we can look at. So that's what we were trying to solve. And so what we did, what we ended up building in the end is this public dashboard, which I promise I'll show off in a couple of minutes here, where we developed a landing page as well as these three different modules to explore, compare, and to rank regions, again, across a wide variety of all these different survey questions that were asked. And so this is what the platform looks like, again, with the explore, compare, and rank functions. And I'm going to dig in that in just a second. And just real quick, some of I kind of could dig into this more in the sort of Q&A if people have questions about the sort of tech stack and things. But there's some important things to note about sort of what is public and private. So like the raw survey data, never leaves our server. It's no way for anyone else to access that. There's lots of care was taken into some of the privacy and those kind of issues. And it's built in React with some Tailwind and other ways to make the visual design really 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 punchy and clear, and Recharts, which is a way to do this, do all the charts, which I'm going to show you in a second, and it's all in SQLite. As I mentioned, there's a lot of care done into the privacy and safety issues here. So some examples. So before I give a live demo, just some examples of things you might want to look at. And so, one of the main preoccupations for the survey were these ideas about sort of suppressed trips and unwanted trips, and understanding kind of how that works for are people taking the right amount of trips, more than they want, less, fewer than they want, and so on. And I should also mention, I'm going to just sort of scratch the surface here. The folks this afternoon are going to go much more into detail in actual research questions and have done much more, much more detailed look at some of these questions. I'm just going to kind of show you the sort of nice visuals and things that you can do here. But this is, one way of looking at this. This is one way of, the question is, thinking about a typical weekly travel activities. I make more trips than I would like, and this is sort of, we're seeing the median, the mean. We're seeing across those things. I can also filter by different groups. So now I'm looking at income of, before this was income less than 60K a year. Now I'm looking at income of 60 to 120K a year. Or more than 100K a year. And so I can see how those kind of, vary from, we're seeing, in general, there's more folks in higher income levels who are doing the trips that they want, right? I can also think about this across cities, right? So that was all 27,000 people. Here, I've narrowed down, I filtered into looking at just the three largest cities by population in the country. So now we're looking at Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. And we can also filter by age, for example, to understand what that looks like. Our older folks kind of have the kind of same satisfaction or perception of what they're doing with their trips. So I'm kind of just going up here by age groups, and so we can see some variance across those age groups, right? And then finally, a really important question is thinking about, when I'm traveling, who's experiencing, fear of crime and harassment, for example. And of course, and that also, varies a lot, or we might hypothesize that it varies a lot by gender, right? And so we can look at these three categories of gender. So, women, men, and folks who identify as non-binary. And we can see some variance, right, in terms of not feeling safe from crime and harassment. But I also might want to go visualize this differently or go into a more sort of disaggregate look at those, these are basically showing just the mean values. So I can do the same thing. I can zoom in and look at sort of how that looks for not safe at all, slightly unsafe, neutral, safe, and very safe. And that's where we see a big difference, especially in the gender non-binary category for feeling very safe, especially relative to men. And yet another way to show the same information here is looking at different way to visualize this, right? By cross, you can show women, men, and non-binary folks in this different way of looking at it. And and so what I'm going to do in the next sort of 10 minutes or so is kind of show you how this works. And so, I'll open up the platform in a second and basically sort of walk you through, you're going to look at what do you want to explore, do you want to compare, do you want to rank? Then you want to go over to the left-hand side here and choose a variable, choose your geography, do any of the filtering you want on various ways of various variables. Think about what kind of view do you want, what kind of figure or graph do you want, what kind of any other kind of default, do you want to sort by a certain value? Do you want to sort alphabetically? What do you want to do? And then one of the most powerful things is that you can simply export whatever you've created. So with that, I'm going to switch over if I can do this quickly. I'll just stop share for a brief second. Okay, so this is the welcome screen. And so here we see the explore, compare, and rank. So I'll start by exploring. And so I go in here. So this is basically where all the magic happens, where you as a user have all the power to decide, what and how you want to show what you want to show. And so, for example, let's say I'm interested in this idea of who has a transit pass, right? And so that's one of the first kind of variables on the left-hand side here. We see all the themes that that Steve had talked about earlier. So the first one here is sort of transport resources. So who has access to what, who owns what kind of mobility tool, and so on. And so, a transit pass, and then bike sharing membership, all of these things are kind of showing up here, with our the weighted and as well as the percentage, right? And so, and we can look at this. We have, in this case, we have two choices of the type of view, depending on if we want to see it as sort of a stacked bar chart or something like this. And we can also sort that by value. So we have some way of just intuitively we want to be able to have a choice of how we want to visualize that, and then we can export either the sort of the raw data, because we can also just look at it like this. We can just see a table. Sometimes that's what you want to see is a table as opposed to something with with a figure. And then I can choose to export either that PNG or the CSV of simply the table that I just showed you. And everything I just showed in the PowerPoint are simply these export function, the PNG. But that's, as I say, that's just the first thing. Maybe I have a question about how transit pass varies geographically, how it varies by gender, how it varies by age, how it varies by ethnicity, for example. And so for one thing, I can go into compare. And then there's even some of these derived variables, like I can look at, for example, transit proximity. I might be interested in knowing more about, how that varies spatially. And so we see a pretty clear pattern, and in the direction we'd expect that the closer you are to transit, the more likely you are to have a transit pass, right? And so we see a pretty clear stepwise difference between. Sorry, I was looking at let's go back to transit pass. And so you see a pretty clear sort of stepwise relationship between, being near transit and having a transit pass. And I might also be interested in either the two choices I have here are either to filter by certain groups. I might again look at something like income groups, and let's say I only want to look at people on the sort of more lower end of that spectrum, and so I can very quickly visualize the same thing. Is there some, because I'm essentially looking at a bivariate relationship here. So my outcome is transit paths. I'm looking at some spatial sort of proximity to transit as well as an income group. And I can see, basically very quickly, in very as you're seeing in real time here, you're in sort of within milliseconds, you can compare how that looks according to income, or any of these other things that you might be interested in. Again, that sort of depends on you as a user, you as a transit agency, the kind of questions you're wanting to explore here. And another question that a lot of people on the call might be interested in is something about this mode evaluation here. So here we're looking at a question of um, walking in your neighborhood as being safe. Um, and so we can look at that again, just the raw data across these different categories. And in fact, I want to go back to my compare and my restrict and just look at the sort of raw data. So, is walking in one's neighborhood safe? And so we can see, across, all of the respondents, we see most people think it's completely, or the majority, the highest ranked thing here is completely safe. And I can again compare that. A question we might be interested again might be something around gender, and we see something for cis women, cis men, and non-binary folks. We see some pretty clear differences in what that looks like across these different gender categories. And we also might want to look at that across income groups, right? And we see something. So this is walking in one's neighborhood being safe. And we see a pretty clear pattern here, especially in the people who think it's completely safe. It's people with higher incomes, assuming maybe live in higher income neighborhoods, feel safer in their neighborhoods than people of lower income, right? So this might lead to a set of research questions. It might lead to a set of interventions that a city might take upon themselves. But again, you're getting just a snapshot of this. And then, as I've mentioned, that's only the explore part of this, right? And so if we want to go into compare, I can actually there's two ways I can look at this. I can add different geographies here, so I can look at different CMAs.
All right,
And
Kevin,
let's say,
you didn't actually click through to compare.
oh, thank you. Mhm.
There you
Yeah, thank you. And then if I go back to mode, let's stick to this mode evaluation. And if I'm looking at, hope my screen seems to be frozen, but I think you can still see. So you're now being able to compare how these different cities that I've looked at, I've chosen Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Steve, can you confirm that you can see that? It looks like it's there, where maybe we're unfreezing. Okay. And so I've chosen those three cities. I can add more if I want. Let's say I want to, that's sort of maybe Halifax, something kind of eastern part of the country. And I can see some adding that, you actually see a pretty big variance here. So apparently there's fewer people are feeling safe walking in Halifax relative to Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. And I can add, let's say I want to add Calgary. And so now that's the maximum of 5 that I'm allowed to use in this. I can show you, once I show you the rank, I can show you how to compare more. But here on these data visualizations, we've decided that 5 is the highest value to allow you to compare. So again, you're getting some just high level insights in terms of what is happening with these different groups. And if I restrict here to, let's say, let's look at ethnicity. And here for the first time, as I mentioned, we're seeing some very important piece of information here. We're seeing that in some cases, once we filter and restrict, we're going to warn you to interpret with caution, which means that there's between 20 and 49 unweighted respondents in a given category in a given place, and if it's fewer than 20 unweighted respondents in a given case, the data is simply omitted. So we don't even want to show you that on a figure or anything, because of that fact. And so that's one of the sort of data privacy issues and data quality issues that we wanted to highlight. That we want to make that really clear, that you can't, we're not going to show you data that we're not confident in. And so I can turn off that filter again. And again, remember, you can change how you visualize these things, in these depending on the data and nature of it. But in terms of this, you usually have two or three choices of what to see, or simply a table view with both the weighted mean and the weighted n for these. And then, and remember, you can always export kind of exactly what you've sort of dialed in. And this looks like just like what I showed in the PowerPoint. You get just a really crisp and clean PNG that gives you exactly what you want to see in whatever format that you want to see it in. And then I'll show you one more thing before opening up to questions if we have time. So the last thing you can do is to rank. And so here again, you have a lot of control as the user of the platform to add a question. So for example, I'm really interested in this idea of like making the trips that I want to make. And so I'm going to add that to the table. And now, because I've chosen, I'm looking at the 13 provinces and territories. I can sort that however I want, right? In either direction. I can switch to CMAs at the click of a button, and same kind of thing. And I can add another variable, right? So I can just sort of build my own table here essentially. But that seems to be
You have to
freezing for
scroll
the second.
upwards, Kevin.
Yeah, just scroll up. There you go.
Oh yeah, sorry, thanks. Yeah, I couldn't see. Yeah, and then I can do, let's say again, I'm looking at something else. I want to say, the distance or the time spent traveling. And there we go. I can just add that. I can then, and then it's super interactive in the sense of I can sort by whichever column I want. I can compare that, in New Brunswick ranks quite low in terms of making the trips one wants to make, but higher in spending the time traveling one would like to make, right? And so again, you've got lots of, I can look at the travel patterns. I can look at something like, biking and a particular option, right? So I want to look at people who are biking once a week, and again, how that varies by CMA, by province, and et cetera. And so you've got a ton of control as a user to do all of these kind of things that you want to do. And as I said, I've only kind of scratched the surface here in terms of what you can do. There's literally thousands and thousands of sort of variable combinations, for whatever kind of question that come to the data with, that you want to come out. And as I mentioned, the folks this afternoon will give even more sort of detailed, explorations of the actual data. That this gives you just a great sort of high level idea of what's available. And again, you can download what you're seeing on this screen, and again, just quickly go back and forth between the spatial scale that you want to look at, and then again, also restrict if I want to look at the same questions for a particular age group. It's just I want to look at sort of younger adults. You can see that data. So you just again just lots and lots of power and flexibility as the user. So I will just go back to my slides for a brief second. And so just to sort of reiterate, we're really excited about this, being this first tool of, make this really rich data set that the team collected. It's accessible to researchers, to non-researchers, to agencies, to the general public. And we're just really excited about the power it has to enable municipalities, advocates, policymakers explore these inequities or success cases, these kind of relationships between transport infrastructure, sociodemographics, and I think I think we managed to deliver on the idea that MJ has of translating research into policy-ready evidence. And with that, I'll say thank you. Open up for a Q&A if we have time. And if people are interested in what KerbGut does, there's some links here in terms of other, this is what we do is we take, complex data and make it user-friendly. We have all kinds of apps and platforms for geospatial information and these kind of questions. So thanks. I'll leave it there. And if there are any questions in time, I'm happy to address them.